here live at Owens Auditorium at the Bradshaw Performing Arts Center. My name is David Michael Wolf, and I'm the conductor of the Carolina Philharmonic. Here are some of our musicians with us this evening. I don't know if I'm alone here, but when it comes to fortune cookies, I'm a bit of a skeptic. Yet, the other day, just like 3 days ago, I was at Chinese takeout, and I got my fortune cookie. Lo and behold, in music, one must think with his heart and feel with his brain. Not bad, huh? Little Zen Buddhist. At first I thought, nonsense, but then I thought, oh my God, that just changed my life. How do you think with your heart? And I thought, well, as musicians, we're always thinking with our heart. We're analyzing with our heart. And as we're studying a piece of music, you'll look at this two-bar phrase, you think, how do I feel? What's the emotion? And then you've discovered the emotion, then you write it in your score. What does this remind me of? And then the next one you have, what is the next emotion? What's the next color? And you write it in. And then once you start seeing what these emotions are, what colors they are, what they evoke in you and how they relate to one another, then eventually you have a sort of analysis of the work you're playing based purely on emotion. So you're thinking with your heart, right? Fortune cookies. So, but then I thought, but how do you feel with your mind? That's just total nonsense. But then I thought, what would Yoda say about that? If a guru came up to you and said, think, what was it? No, feel with your mind, feel with your mind. So the Zen Buddhist would say, if you can get behind your mind, and your mind is the thoughts like, all these constant conversations that we have with the crazy person inside our head. Now, if you can get behind that and just feel your mind without the mind itself, then you'd be able to feel your mind. And that's essentially, if you're in the moment, the Zen Buddhist would say, if you're in the moment and you're behind your thoughts, then you're able to do that. So that was my weekly meditation. And that's the last fortune cookie I'm going to open because you're not going to get that kind of luck again. So there it is. It's a real thing. Now, music, Mozart. So before we get into a program, I want to thank our season sponsors, PNC Bank, Duke Energy, Life 103.1 FM, the Milwaukee Foundation, and Sandhills Community College, where we're at here. I would ask you to give a round of applause for our sponsors. I'll let you do that at home, stomping and whatnot. And thank you all for being here tonight. This is a really special piece for me and for the orchestra. For a lot of the orchestra up here, this is their first time back. Some of them were back with us at Christmas time for our Christmas stream, but now we're doing Mozart. Now I wanted to walk you through a little bit of the piece before we get into it and play it. We're in Vienna at 1786. Mozart is just about to premiere The Marriage of Figaro. So he is at the height of his powers, and in his spare time, because he has this a concert series coming up, a subscription series in Vienna, he is writing a series of pieces, including this piano concerto, the 23rd of 27 piano concerti. And he's writing it for himself as a soloist and conductor. And Mozart, unlike many other composers, tended to compose basically by just taking dictation from the heavens. The work would almost come to him completely formed, and he would just write it down as if you're taking dictation. And I wonder if that wasn't the case with this time. Sometimes he would go back and revise things over and over again, but that was very rare. Usually it was just finished form. He would write it out. He might write out a whole individual part for the flute one, and then he'd write clarinet one, start to finish, and he didn't have to write vertically like all the other common composers might, like Beethoven. Now, if we look at this piece, it's a piano concerto, and the structure of it has three movements. There's an allegro, which is like a medium fast, andante, like a walking tempo, a slower tempo, and then the third movement is a presto, a sort of lively, faster tempo. Now, the whole thing lasts about 26 minutes. The first movement, the structure of it, the architecture, is a sonata allegro form. And in a concerto, typically you'll have the exposition, which is, you might have the first theme, the second theme, closing theme, and first it's presented by the orchestra, and it's called a double exposition. So you have the orchestra, first theme, which in this case, then you have the second theme, and then you'll get your closing theme. And after that, then the piano solos will come in, and you'll have the exposition first theme, second theme, and the closing theme stated again, but together, go back and forth together with the orchestra and the soloist. Then after the exposition, you'll have what's called the development. And the development typically in most sonatas and most concertos, you'll take the first theme or the second theme or both themes, and you'll kind of play around with it, maybe chop it up. You'll take it through different keys. You'll take it away from your home key, which is, in this case, is A major, and you'll kind of play around with it, dissect it, and then after that, you arrive at the recapitulation, which is basically the exposition again. So you have the first theme, second theme, closing theme, this time all in the home key of the tonic. And, but what's curious about this concerto is that when you get to the development, this quote-unquote development, Mozart brings up a totally new melody, which I think of as the prayer theme. It's as if you get to the exposition, or after the double exposition, you get to the development, and instead of having a proper development, he says, why don't you come with me into this outer corridor? And he takes you into a chapel or a garden, and he says, he shows you a completely new idea, giving you sort of a vacation or just an escape from what you've just heard. And then he starts to develop this new theme, and he completely ignores the first theme, second theme, and closing theme. Very bad composition. Very bad technique here, right? And then after the short development of this third new theme, this prayer theme, and nobody knows where it comes from, what it means, then you land back at the recapitulation, and you're back at the first theme. So you're back home again, and so in a way he gives you the material twice, and then he takes you on a little escapade, perhaps into the chapel or however you like to imagine it. Then you're back and you have the first theme again, and it feels like home. Then you have the second theme, and you have the closing theme. And in a concerto, what happens next is that the orchestra would then bring you to the cadenza. And what happens here is you have the first theme, second theme, and then suddenly he brings you into this prayer theme, again, in the middle of the recapitulation. And then the capitulation ends, and then the orchestra comes back to the prayer theme. So now it's the third time, right? This completely out of place theme that's starting to feel like it's maybe the main point of the whole piece. And then the cadenza comes, and the cadenza is the point where the soloist is able to improvise on the various themes of the piece. And usually Mozart would actually improvise it, but one of his students asked if he would write down a cadenza for her to play, him or her, I'm not sure who the pupil was. And so he wrote down a cadenza, and in the cadenza as well, rather than developing the first theme or the second theme or the closing theme, he starts playing around with the same idea of the prayer theme. And that's the whole cadenza, and it's very free and it's like a fantasy. There's no tempo, it wanders around, it's a beautiful sort of escape, it's dreamlike. And then the orchestra comes back in and closes it up. And so that's the first movement. It's quite extraordinary. The architecture of it is sort of unheard of and miraculous and wonderful. And you have to ask yourself, well, what is this prayer? What is this idea that he keeps bringing back this out of place? Now, the first movement is nothing compared to the second movement, where you have this haunting theme in the key of F sharp minor. And I'll tell you why that's important in a second. Listen to this theme. piano begins all by himself in this case. And it's very lonely, it's very pure, it's very romantic, heartfelt, and it feels like it could almost belong to the future, like an early romantic piece. What's curious about this is that it's in the key of F sharp minor, which, as most of you know, there are 12 major keys, 12 minor keys, and in the classical period, Mozart typically would write for the keys that were closest to C major, because C major has 0 sharps, 0 flats. And the keys that are closer to that tend to be easier to put together for the orchestra and for the instruments at that time. So this piece in A major, first movement and last movement are in A major, has 3 sharps. But the second movement is an F sharp minor, which also has 3 sharps. So you would think that Mozart would have written very often in this key of F sharp minor. He wrote about 1,500 or so movements, and out of his entire output, this movement in F sharp minor is the only thing he ever wrote in F sharp minor. So you've got to imagine you've got to ask yourself, why would Mozart avoid this key that should have been very standard, and that for other composers was standard to use? Composers tend to have a very special relationship to a key. And so C major might represent a certain mood, and it might bring certain colors to mind, maybe even memories. Other keys might be very dark, or maybe might elicit responses in them, or memories, or maybe they might connect it with a person or a memory or an experience. And I have to believe that Mozart associated F sharp minor with something very, very personal, something very dark, perhaps loss, and with a very special memory that's very close to your heart. Maybe he was afraid to bring up that mood in himself or that memory. Maybe he was afraid that by remembering something so precious that it would somehow evaporate. Like when you have a dear memory to yourself, and each time you retell it or you're thinking about it again, it starts to weaken a little bit. For whatever reason, Mozart avoided this key his entire life, except for this one movement. And the poignancy, the despair, the bareness of it, the loneliness of it, is just extraordinary, and it's so pure. And right in the middle of this, after you have the F sharp minor theme stated, out of nowhere, like an intermezzo, almost like just coming down from the heavens, you have this tremendous A major melody. And all the tension immediately just evaporates, and it's like angels came down from the heavens. And after this middle section, it descends back again into the F sharp minor, to the original theme. And with the juxtaposition of that light and those angelic voices, the darkness and the despair of the F sharp minor melody is even darker and more desperate. Notes, but somehow completely transformed by the experience of the A major section. The orchestration of this is tremendous, and throughout this piece, the orchestration that we have the string sections, of course, which is kind of the bread and butter of all Mozart's orchestral works. Typically, you might have 2 oboes. There are no oboes tonight. Instead, he orchestrated it for a single flute on top rather than a pair, which is he would often use a single flute. 2 clarinets. Tonight we just have 1, but 2 clarinets. And whenever he had clarinets, which was kind of a new phenomenon sweeping Europe, because they were becoming, it was such an extraordinary instrument. Whenever Mozart had clarinets at his disposal, he would tend to write for them. And so the brighter sound of that period of the oboe was replaced essentially with the clarinet, a warmer, silkier, very heartwarming sound. And then also, there's no trumpets, which a lot of the concerti would have 2 trumpets. A lot of the concerti would have a timpani. So these brighter sounds and the percussive sounds are taken out. And he gives you an orchestration full of colors. We have the French horns, the pair of French horns in the back here, which are able to blend in seamlessly with the wind instruments, but also come out just a little bit whenever necessary to give us that brass flavor, but without having the brightness of the trumpets. So he's giving you these colors that are so warm and soothing. Now, moving into the third movement, then after the despair of the second movement, that's delicious despair, it's gorgeous. Then you have this. I don't know. It's so hard to move from the second movement to the third movement because suddenly, immediately, you've got this joy, this vibrancy, this lightness, this joie de vivre in the rondo theme of the last movement. Now that theme is a rondo, the last movement, and the rondo basically means you have a rondo theme, and then you have other ideas that kind of circle around it, but you keep coming back to the rondo. And so this starts with the rondo, and then you have a second theme, and some people might call it a second first theme, but we won't get into that. And then you have a third theme in minor. Now, here again, we would expect to have a development section developing the first theme and second theme, perhaps even the rondo theme. And instead, Mozart takes us on another kind of escapade, and we have an intermezzo section with two completely new themes. One of them is kind of shocking. And then after that, you've this lilting, marvelous theme that is tossed back and forth between the piano and the winds, and then piano and the strings, and so forth. So then after that little bit, then we do return to the rondo, and then we have our second theme and our third theme, and it ends in a sort of frolicking coda that brings the whole 26-minute piece to a close. So with that kind of brief kind of overview of the different themes and the structure of the piece, I hope that'll give you some guideposts. And I began saying that we shouldn't think with our brains, and I think we just did that a little bit. I apologize, but we will now begin. What one must think with his heart and feel with the brain. There you go. Mozart's K488, 23rd Piano Concerto. Thank you for being with us tonight. Enjoy. Thank you so much. One of my favorite piano concertos of Mozart, as I hope you can tell, one that I've never had a chance to play before, so it's such a pleasure to try it out on you with this marvelous group of musicians. Round of applause at home for the Carolina Philharmonic. Thank you so much. We're going to be back next month with some Beethoven, and so I hope you'll join us next month. Thank you for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it. I wish we had you all here in the auditorium with us. Looking forward to having you back. The day is coming, and so just hold tight. In the meantime, we have these live streams, and it's been a pleasure sharing the evening with you. Thank you.